Brass. They live in a little town called Lone Pine. I don't know if any of you have heard of Lone Pine. And my dad owned the little country store, and he also raised cattle. And a friend of his gave him a little orphaned buffalo calf. And he raised this buffalo at the store, and he grew so attached to it that he sold all of his cattle and decided to raise buffalo. And he named the little buffalo Chip. And here's the lone pine, the lone pine tree. And I have the meadowlark in there in the little story. Chip is now 13 years old. She's still on the ranch. My dad is still in the buffalo business. And I'll just read some of the little pages in here. This one is, my dad's name is Bud, and he hurries to make a comfortable pen for his little calf near his country store. The pen has leafy alfalfa hay to nibble on and a straw bed. Chip is a baby and needs to be bottle fed. Bud stirs together powdered milk and warm water until all the lumps disappear. Then he pours the rich milk into a half-gallon bottle and goes to feed his hungry buffalo calf. And there's a picture of the little buffalo calf growing up. And then there she is out in front of the store. She actually goes inside the store. And he put a little halter on her, too. And so it was just kind of fun for everybody to stop in and watch Chip grow up. And she changes color. And I don't know if you guys know what sound a buffalo makes. Do you guys know? It kind of makes the sound like, So my dad would do that, and then the little buffalo would follow him. So everybody learned how to go, And so when I go to the schools and read the book, then I let the children do the part, and then they kind of get involved with the story. So it's kind of fun for the kids to see how Chip grows up and to see the different habits of a buffalo, too. Here she's getting a little older. She looks more like a buffalo here on this page. Then I have a picture of the bitterroot. There's also bitterroot growing where the buffalo are roaming on my dad's ranch. And there's a little killdeer. And this was really a sad day for my dad when he had to put Chip into the field with the other buffalo. I think it hurt him more than it did Chip. And then I had my husband draw a little Native American drawing of a buffalo there. I wanted something Native American in my little book. And Chip loves pellets, and there's my dad feeding her pellets. She comes, she runs, she hears him coming. Buffalo can't see very well, but they can hear. And when she hears his Jeep coming, she runs for some pellets. I think this is an awesome picture of a buffalo. You can really see their beard. The Native Americans used the beard for ropes, for their dolls. And that really shows the beard. There's a little bluebird. There's also bluebirds where the buffalo are roaming. And Chip likes to dust herself in a wallow. It is her favorite place in the field. She digs a pit with her feet and rolls around in the dirt or mud. She dusts herself to keep the flies and bugs away, and perhaps to absorb the minerals. One thing is certain, she makes a big cloud of dust when the ground is dry. The winter days are getting colder. North wind blows snow across the frozen ground. Chip has grown a thick woolly coat to keep her warm. Now Bud feeds the buffalo bales of hay every day. Chip likes to follow behind the tractor as it scatters out the bales. The sweet, strong smell of the hay makes her hungry. Several bald eagles are sitting in the tall trees near the buffalo field. The huge birds swoop down and catch the mice that crawl out of the hay as Chip eats. And there's an eagle there. We counted 6 eagles in the tree by the buffalo fields the other day. There's some awesome picture of buffalo fighting. And Chip, she discovered she had horns, and she used those horns like a pitchfork. And then she took off one day on my dad and went to the neighbors and stole their Christmas lights. The lady that she stole them from, her name was Sophie. When I read this at Hot Springs School, the kids got so excited because there was a Sophie in school there. She was a little first grader. So I thought that was pretty neat that there was a Sophie in the story. And there is a picture of the buffalo shedding. The last page is, once again, it is spring. The meadowlark sings from the fence post in the meadow. The killdeer eats insects in the plowed field. The bluebird builds a nest in the old cherry tree. Bud apologizes to Sophie and gives her a new box of lights for next Christmas, and it is calving time for the buffalo. Bud sees a buffalo cow all alone at the top of the hill. It is Chip and her first newborn baby. The protective mother stays right beside her little red-haired calf. So it does have a happy ending. And then I have a page of facts about buffalo. I think that's an awesome picture of a buffalo, too. And then my very last page is facts about Montana, because I did include the pine tree, the bitterroot, the meadowlark. And my friends here from Hot Springs School made up some little worksheets for their students. This one is probably for kindergarten, first, second grade, and it is a buffalo robe, and they can draw whatever little symbols they would like on their buffalo robe. And these handouts are on the table out there, if any of you would like to get these to go with your Native American studies. This one is probably for the older children. It has all the different uses that they used the buffalo parts for. And then here's some other worksheets that are probably for older children, maybe third or fourth grade, I would say. I read my story to the children at Paradise School. The whole school has 32 children in it, K through 8. It was kind of hard to do the different age levels, but when I got done, an 8th grader came up to me and she said, "I wish I was an Indian." And I thought, oh, well, we touched somebody's heart. So you want to go ahead?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm Becky Mossbacher, and I'm the middle school librarian here at Hellgate. And I thought I would like to go next because I saw that the title of her book was Chip the Buffalo, and I thought this is a great segue into what I'm going to do, because I'm going to show you some terrible excerpts from books, and one is about the buffalo. I'll get to that in a minute. I'm not Native American. I have a very soft spot in my heart for any minority student in Montana because my son's African American. And I've had experiences with him where I, as a parent, have been just shocked at how insensitive people can be in the educational community. And one of the things that happened to him in 3rd grade was that he came home and he had a book on Booker T. Washington, and he was reading it to himself, and he said, "Mom, what's a Negro?" And I was just stunned. I said, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" And he showed me this book that was published in probably 1957 or something. And I explained to him how language changes and how at one time Negro was a word that probably was respectful, but it wasn't now. We just kind of talked about the whole issue. And when I called the librarian to suggest that maybe she replace that book with a more updated version, she said no. And it was very disturbing to me because she said, "Well, you can have that discussion with him and explain that." And I said, "Yes, I will do that, but what about every other child's mother? What about his best friend who's reading this book and says, 'What's a Negro?' And his mother will say, 'Oh, Christopher's a Negro.'" I mean, that's just so inappropriate. So that's where I'm coming from. And when I was approached about learning more about Native American perspectives, I thought I'd be a perfect person because I do think I have a great sensitivity toward it, although I'm not Native American myself. And some of the things when you are reading a book that you should keep in mind are looking at the perspective of who wrote it. She had this wonderful book about Chip the Buffalo, and we see her perspective. I want to share with you an excerpt. This I got from the Oyate conference that I went to earlier this year, and I would like your input after we read it. I'd like someone else to read because I have a really bad cold. I've been sick for 2 days, and I don't think I can read all of this. So I asked Ellen Marshall if she would mind. Could you do that, Ellen? Can everybody see that, I hope?
Can you hear us? Yes. Okay. This is from a non-Native perspective. The buffalo was the superstore of the Native American peoples of the Northern Plains. The buffalo was a grocery store, a hardware store, even a toy store. After a hunt, the Indians ate buffalo every day, buffalo boiled, buffalo broiled, dried buffalo, and sometimes raw buffalo. The horns of the buffalo were made into spoons and cups. The muscles into its backbone were used as thread for sewing. The stomach of the buffalo was cleaned out and made a fine pot. Buffalo ribs were used as skis, and even dried buffalo droppings were used as fuel for campfires. And I don't know if you can see, but there are exclamation points throughout.
And that's what I wanted to point out. If anyone else, I would like this to be an audience participation thing. Do you see anything that might be, these are the questions that I think you should ask. First of all, is it truthful? Is it respectful? Would it embarrass or hurt a Native child? And is there anything that would foster stereotypical thinking in a non-Indian child? So I would look for things like, is this condescending in any way? Is there anything portrayed that makes it look like this is just totally, well, I'm thinking the word gross. A kid might think that. Can somebody tell me some keywords or punctuation marks that they noticed here that might be offensive? Colleen?
I think the word grocery store and burger store.
And even a toy store.
Oh, yes.
All of this. And that's why I thought it was so awesome that Sherry had a book here, because you can see the difference in perspective. This is a white person who has no respect, obviously. Well, they're pretty amazed by this. Is there anything else that people want to point out? Ellen pointed out the exclamation points, and I think you should have read it more like this.
Oh.
The buffalo is a grocery store, a hardware store, even a toy store. You know, that's what those exclamation points are telling us, people. So I think those are offensive. There's a
Even used that all the time. Well, everybody was on the plains used buffalo droppings. Doesn't matter whether they were native.
Right. So the dried buffalo droppings, like, isn't that gross? Anything else that people want to?
Sometimes raw buffalo exclamation point, like I feel like they're saying, and sometimes like raw buffalo, like, oh,
And let's
isn't
talk
that
about
gross?
all these ways that they eat buffalo. Does anyone think of Forrest Gump? Fried shrimp,
Yeah.
boiled shrimp. That's what went through my head. It's like, oh my goodness. So, we got it boiled, broiled, dried, and sometimes even raw. I'm thinking Forrest Gump. Is there anything else we need to point out, or can you see my point here? This is good information. Look at the sheet that Sherry showed you with all the uses for the buffalo. What a different perspective, saying the same uses, but it's respectful. This is very condescending. I didn't have to tell you this. I know I'm probably just preaching to a choir here, but here's from the Plains people's perspective, and if Ellen would be kind enough to read this, see the difference.
If I can read it correctly.
Would you like the, there are no exclamation points.
Okay.
You can push that over to her, should help.
Our brother the buffalo, now vanished, was truly a gift from the Great Spirit. He sacrificed his life that we may live. His flesh was our food, his bones our tools, his skin our clothing, and our dwelling place. After he was gone, his spirit came back as a messenger from the Great Spirit to grant our people good health, happiness, and long life.
Is there something here, a word that you can think of that sums up the difference between the first excerpt and this one? I have a particular word in mind, but something else. What did you say? It's authentic. Great, that's good.
Gift.
A gift. Okay, that is. I'm thinking reciprocity. We give this, it gives back. I mean, one of the things I read, I'm going to show you a couple of books here in a minute, was a lot of non-natives portray Native people as, in quotes, relentlessly ecological. And that's just not true. It's all reciprocal, and you can tell a good... I've got another wonderful one here for you. This is from a non-Iroquois perspective. Ellen, would you like to read that one?
Iroquois false faces were painted masks worn by shamans during special ceremonies. The features on false faces were strange and exaggerated. Their mouths were twisted, their eyes bugged out, and their hair, made from horsetails, stuck out wildly in all directions. In order to keep the false faces alive, the Iroquois sometimes fed them meals of tobacco.
Any words here that are offensive or meaning punctuation marks included? Strange. It's strange. Where is strange? That's
Strange. Stuck out wildly in all
wildly.
directions.
Oh, I have to find out. Stuck out wildly. All these adjectives.
Quotes around the line.
I love that you picked that out. I love these quotes. It's terrible. Anything else? I mean, the whole thing is,
The mouths were twisted and the eyes bugged out.
you know, all of this. Eyes bugged out, twisted mouths. Here's something you should be looking for always. Special ceremonies. This person is non-native and they're talking about a special ceremony. So I'm thinking religious ceremony. And it's just written so disrespectfully that it's not appropriate. This is from an Iroquois perspective. The same information. Ellen, would you read that, please?
Okay. Our masks are alive. They represent and contain a power beyond anything we can comprehend. We have been instructed to take care of them. When we are not using them, we keep them away from view, covered with a blanket in a dark corner in a safe place. We feed them, and in turn, they take care of us. They help us when we are ill. They help us to remember who we are.
Do you see any key thing about this version versus this one? The verb usage, could somebody point it out to me? Who said that? What'd you say?
Present tense.
Present tense. This is present tense. This is not something that was done long ago. This is done now. And this is a very special religious thing that is done. I just can't believe the first excerpt when I read that second one. And for anybody in here who is saying, yeah, whatever, get over it, I wanted to share this because, and I don't mean to offend anybody here. The first time I heard this, I was offended, I have to tell you. This came from Lies My Teachers Told Me, a book that some of you might be familiar with. Says, these Americans believed that one great male God ruled the world. Sometimes they divided him into three parts, which they called the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. They ate crackers and wine or grape juice, believing they were eating the Son's body and drinking his blood. If they believed strongly enough, they would live on forever after they died. Past tense, something that many of us believe with all our hearts, and it's just trivialized. And I just wanted to leave you with that because I think that I get really irritated when people say, well, they shouldn't be offended. And that's a clue to us and them. It just shouldn't exist. But when people say that to me about anything, the tomahawk chop or whatever, I shared this with Michael Munson when it's the first conversation we ever had, is that if it offends somebody, who cares if it offends me? It's offensive. And I just think that should be our philosophy about how we deal with everything for any human being. I got some of my information about things to look for from these two textbooks, and I will put these with Ellen's books. When you are done, you may look for them at Oyate. I got this from the Oyate conference, and they're available at oyate.org. This one is Points of View versus Historical Bias, and this one is How to Tell the Difference, a guide to evaluating children's books for anti-Indian bias. And these are both excellent, very easy to read. And, so I just want to promote those.
I'm Ellen Marshall, and I'm the librarian here at Hellgate Elementary in grades 3 through 5, and this is my 15th year as an elementary librarian. My training was finished at the University of Montana as a librarian for just previous to that, to my hiring, and during that training, we were encouraged to develop school library collections that reflected various cultures, and we were taught what kind of selection tools to use as our guidelines, things like school library journal and book list and horn book. And I realized in the last year or so that all this training has not been very effective in developing our Native American collection in our library. And I think the reasons for that are that so many of the books that we have purchased that have been recommended by these journals are written by non-Native people, and also the reviewers are not Native people. And so, that therein lies the problem. And thank goodness for the state mandate of Indian Education for All, and especially for the funding that supports that, because it is providing teachers, librarians, opportunities to learn more, to do things more correctly and appropriately. As Becky mentioned, she and I attended an Oyate workshop. It was sponsored by OPI, and it was in Lewistown last fall. And it was geared toward school librarians. And they were a little nervous with us coming because they didn't know what they were going to do with a room full of 50 librarians, but they learned to love us after 3 days, didn't they? And for those of you who are not familiar with Oyate, it is a Native organization that's dedicated to honestly portraying Native stories and histories, and also giving credit where credit is due for those Native stories. And I'd like to share with you tonight some of the books that I learned about through that conference, or through the readings that I've done since then. And two of the books that have been really helpful to me and that were introduced at that workshop were Through Indian Eyes, The Native Experience in Books for Children. It's written by Beverly Slapin, who was one of our instructors at the workshop, and Doris Seal. This book has been around since 1987, but this is an updated version with a copyright of 2006. It's divided into several parts, and the first part is full of essays and poetry by Native people. And then there's a section of book reviews of books not all written by Native people, but books that have to do with Native American culture. And they're critical reviews, and then they're arranged alphabetically by author's last name. And then the last part of the book is devoted to instruction in how to evaluate picture books, how to evaluate other types of writing, both fiction and nonfiction, including probably some activities similar to what Becky had just demonstrated. Another book that I think this book grew out of Through Indian Eyes, because it's by the same authors, Doris Seal and Beverly Slapin, and the full name is A Broken Flute, The Native Experience in Books for Children. This is a really wonderful resource. How many of you are familiar with this book already? A few of you are. I hopefully schools, I think probably in District 1, I don't know if each school has their own copy, but I highly recommend it. This one is divided into sections also, and the beginning, the introductory part is full of, again, essays, but the essays that I found particularly moving were ones done by children, and they are stories written in reaction to some book or unit of study introduced in their classroom that offended them or hurt them, and sometimes their response was just to go home and cry about it, or to share their upset in their writing. But sometimes the parents followed up, or the child went back and tried to talk to the teacher about ways they might do things differently, or to try to understand why they were upset by these things. And unfortunately, most of the time the response by the teachers or the administrators was not very favorable or not very sensitive in return. I think those essays are very worthwhile for any teacher to read. A large section of this book is, there's about 200 pages of reviews of, similar to Through Indian Eyes, reviews of Native American books. And they're very nicely arranged alphabetically by author, but they're also cross-referenced in the back, so if you just need to pick up the book, you can look in the back and look up the reviews by title as well, or even by the reviewer's name. And the credits of each reviewer are listed in the credentials of each reviewer are listed in the back. In the middle section of the book, they have some different reviews, and they're grouped by popular topics in Native American literature, and comparing and contrasting some good books and some not very good books, and instructing the reader in how to evaluate a book of that sort. Some of the topics are raven or coyote or dream catchers, and some and other topics as well. And I'd like to share some of the books, some of the better books with you. And I always feel it's helpful to me to actually see the books, so I've brought them along, and I don't know how well you can see everything from there, but one whole group of evaluations is based on photo essays, and a really excellent series that I was pleased to find out I had quite a few of this series in my library already are called, the name of the series is We Are Still Here, and they're published by Learner Publications out of Minneapolis, and each book features a child in a Native community in living their modern life, but also incorporated in their life are activities that teach them the how and why of traditions that are important to their family. And they cover things as Children of the Clay, a family of Pueblo potters, one on the traditional Native sugar making. This one takes place in Minnesota. Songs of the Loom, from the Loom, a Navajo girl learns to weave. Weaving, a California tradition, a Native American basket maker. Clam bake, a Wampanoag tradition. And Four Seasons of Corn, a Winnebago tradition. This one I found especially interesting. They show the boy, playing on his computer, playing hockey, playing sports, football, but he must travel at different times of the year to go to Nebraska because his grandfather's tribe is located there. His grandfather lives with him in Minnesota, but they go and take place at different seasons to grow the corn and harvest it, and then to celebrate with it later. Another one is from I don't know if I say it right, it's called A Story to Tell, Traditions of a Tlingit Community. And this one does not center around an activity as the other ones do. They include maps to show where in the United States or Canada the family lives, and they often include some legend or folktale or a legend that goes along with their activity. They're just very honest portrayals of modern life, and they show the children as part of an extended family. Another photo essay that was highly recommended, many of you familiar with this book, Powwow by George Anacana. This one has been around for a while. It was written in 1993, and it actually discusses the modern powwow, and this one was held on the Crow Reservation in Montana. And again, this is a bigger crowd than I expected, so I don't know that you can see the wonderful photographs, but I'll leave all of these out for you to look at afterwards. Another book that I have that's in the nonfiction section of my library, and every time I go past it, I always think, is that in the right place? Because it's called The Gift Horse, a Lakota Story by S.D. Nelson. And when you open it up, it's in the section of history, geography, the 900s, but yet when you open it up, the artwork is so beautiful. It looks like it belongs in the folktales and legends section. The author and illustrator is a member of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe in Dakota, and he wrote a story based on his grandfather's stories to tell of what it takes to become a Lakota warrior, and it begins with the gift of a horse that the boy receives. But the artwork, he did his own artwork, and he based it on the art of the Plains Indians, but it's telling an honest story of the history of the Lakota people. Another section that's covered in the Broken Flute, where it's covered by topic, is the section on residential schools. And for those of you who may not be familiar, children starting at about the age of 6 or 7, sometimes even younger, were required to, they were taken from the reservations and required to attend Indian agency boarding schools. The purpose of these schools was, and it was stated to save the man but kill the Indian. And so they removed the children from their homes so that and did not allow them to speak their native languages. They were punished if they did. They wanted them away from their parents. They didn't want any of the cultural influence. And often the training was more toward vocational training, or not geared toward further academic life. And the whole section of the book centers around a condemnation of this particular book, My Heart is on the Ground, the diary of a Nanny Little Rose's Sioux girl. And I don't really want to talk a lot about the books that are not recommended, but this one has been found to be particularly offensive. If you're familiar with how many of you are familiar with the Dear America series? Okay, they're written in diary form. And so the Broken Flute tries to provide alternatives books, and one of the ones recommended that I don't have to show you is called Mush Hole. And I forget the author, but I have it written somewhere. And it is a memoir. It's a nonfiction book. This one is a fiction book. It is a memoir. The Mush Hole is a memoir, and the title comes from the fact that they ate mush every day. But it was about a girl who attended an Indian agency boarding school in Ontario from the time she was 7. Two books on that same theme are that I have with me. One of them is Shishietko by Nicola Campbell, and this is a fiction book, and it's just beautifully illustrated, and it is about a little girl who is counting the days down until she has to leave to an Indian or a residential school, and she soaks up all the things that she can: a hug from her grandmother, a canoe ride with her father, a walk in the water with her mother, and she tucks little mementos from each thing, a rock or a branch of a tree, and puts them in a leather bag and with some tobacco for an offering, and hides them under a tree to be there for her when she returns from the residential school. And the story ends with her riding off in a truck, being taken to the school. These children, if their parents did not send them to these schools, they could have been put in jail. So they had no choice, and they often sent them also because they did not have enough to feed them, and at least the children would be fed when they were at these schools. But they did not necessarily leave. They left loving homes and homes that had rich culture in them. This one is a biography by Larry Loy, and it's called As Long as the Rivers Flow, and it's a similar idea to the other one, only he is reminiscing about the summer of 1944, his last summer at home with his family. He is a Cree Indian, and he was sent to St. Bernard's Mission in Alberta, and he remembers things. The illustrations, again, are beautiful. He remembers the time of his family raising a wounded owl, and also the time they would go to a summer camp where they did things like gathered berries and fished and hunted and prepared their food for the winter. And he awakens one morning and overhears his mother and grandmother talking, and finds out that he and his younger brothers and sister are being sent away to a residential school. And the last picture shows, there's just a little picture of the truck, And it says these two tall men dressed in black, and they reminded him of crows coming to get him. And here they are crying as they drive off. They have to leave their families. They have no preparation for this whatsoever. Another section of the Broken Flute is devoted to stories and books to dispel the myth of Thanksgiving. One that has been around for a few years, and it is published by, it's called 1621, A New Look at Thanksgiving, and it is done by the National Geographic Society. It's a collaboration with the people of Plymouth Plantation, who had for years just been presenting the colonists' point of view, and they collaborated with more recently have collaborated with the Wampanoag people to show the native perspective to that time. And it shows a lot of different things, the language, the food, the diplomacy on the part of the Wampanoag people. And it even includes some recipes. And at the end, has an article about dispelling a section dispelling the myth of Thanksgiving, or how it evolved to what it is. I recommend this book, which we were introduced to at the Oyate conference, and it's called Thanksgiving, a Native Perspective. And this has essays and activities, and I really think all schools should have an opportunity, all the teachers should have an opportunity to read this and go through it before next Thanksgiving. So many of the Native American books that I have that I currently have in the library at our school are legends and folktales, or I should say takeoffs on legends and folktales of Native people. They're often a mishmash of various cultures, and sometimes the artwork isn't even representative of the culture that they're writing about. And I don't have a lot of things to replace those. A few things. Dottie's going to pronounce this for me because I do not.
Well, actually, is there anybody in here who's Cree?
It's Cree.
Well, my understanding of it is that it's Wiskitchek.
Wiskitchek, okay. It's a beautifully illustrated story, and I won't tell the whole story, but one of the most interesting things to me is that the Cree language is written on the bottom half of the page. The woman who wrote the story said that she's part of a generation that lost the language. She was fortunate to have these stories handed down by her uncle, who took the time to write them down because they'd been passed down in Cree, but he wrote them down in English for her. And she is hoping, as their culture is being revived, that there's, or at least the language and the interest in the culture is being revived, that her children will someday be able to read the story in Cree. That one is by Frida Ahenaku. I'll leave these all out for you if you want to write them down. And I do have, I don't know if, not everything is on these. I have two handouts. One is the OPI list that was given to us. I think that's available to print up, but there's copies of it that was put together by Dottie, the Indian Education Literature Resource Guide. And if you want a copy of this, and the other thing that I have a copy of for you to have is the Missoula Public Library. Karen Gonzalez was with us, with Becky and me, when we went to the Oyate conference, and she has a recommended list. You can go on the Missoula Public Library website or the card catalog online, and you can, there's a list that you can print. Well, I don't know if you can print it from there. That's why you might want to take a copy of this, of everything that they have. It's not annotated, but everything that they have that she recommends. This does not mean every Native American book. It's the books that Karen recommends. The elders of the Kootenai Culture Committee and also of the Salish Cultural Committee have worked on preserving some of their stories that have been oral stories, but they've written them down. And this one is from the Salish Cultural Committee of the Confederated, I don't know if you pronounce that differently. Do you say Salish? It sounded like you said it differently before. Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes. This one is a set of coyote stories. And they're very simply written and simply illustrated. And similar to those are these stories. This is a much thicker book, and this is, and I saw the writing, this is in Kootenai language, Tunaha. I'm not sure I'm saying it right, but they're legends. Many of them feature coyote, but there are other characters in it as well, mostly animal characters. And the stories, again, are very simply illustrated. I don't know quite what to make of some of the stories. Some of them are funny. Some of them reminded me of Aesop's fables. Some of them teach a lesson. Some of them are just there, but they are their stories, and they're there for the taking in this book. And I think it's wonderful that we have some stories that are local. This one was more recently published and looks a lot more like the kinds of books I was talking about that are written by non-native people and so highly recommended in reviews, but really are, sometimes a mishmash of cultures. It's called A Salish Coyote Story, Beaver Steals Fire. And in addition to the story, there is a note about the importance of fire in our locale. And also, at the end of this book, there is a guide to the written Salish and International Phonetic Alphabet. And this is, there is an author on this. They talk about Johnny R. Lee, but they do not say that he is the author. They talk more about the illustrator, Sam Sandoval. And I think some of these stories, even though they may look like they're quite young, I know that the students in my building would enjoy hearing these stories, up through 5th grade and maybe older, just because they are local.
Could I just add something?
Yes.
There is a website and a DVD that goes along with this. It came out of a grant program. Sherry, you maybe know about that. Jermaine White is the creator with Rockwell, I think that was his name, creator of that. And it is a fabulous teaching about how Indians used fire. So the story is a springboard for that. So it's a great science lesson. And I think the whole thing, if you order it, maybe you might end up paying $25 or you might pay nothing. I don't know. It was a whole grant program, so that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. There's fire management by the native people. Yes. And I don't. Am I just running too long? I brought along a few other books. I think I'll narrow it down to. This book is by Joseph Bruchac, The Arrow Over the Door, and it is written about. It was written about a time in 1777. It's written from alternating perspectives of a Quaker boy, about a 14-year-old Quaker boy who's a little bit embarrassed at this time when war is brewing to be on the, to belong to such a pacifist family. And the other point of view is a boy, a Benaki boy who is named To Stand Straight, and he is joined with some of the other men from his tribe, and they think they're going to be on the side of the English, and they're kind of on a scouting party. They don't really know. They're not. He has a particular hate for Americans because his mother and brother were killed by Americans, and but so he considers them as enemies. But he's on a scouting trip, and they're scouting out this group of Quakers at a meeting. And I won't tell what happens exactly, and the events of the meeting are very dramatic, and that part of the story is very exciting. Some of the lead up to the story is a little bit slow because it's teaching you so much of the background and filling you in. So I think maybe I would consider this a read aloud instead of recommending kids to read it to themselves, because I'm so afraid, not being Captain Underpants, they won't stick with it long enough. Yes?
My class is reading that. My low students just finished it. It took them about 8 days to get through it. We did it as a discussion book. They wanted to know when the sequel's coming out.
No.
That's number one. Number two, my higher students have had to say, we want to hold back a little on that. The other thing, that's based on a true
Yes,
reading.
yes, it is.
And the thing that makes that really my ancestors were Quakers at that meeting.
Ooh.
Wow.
So to get, right now, I'm attempting to get the minutes of the Quaker meeting, because those minutes were kept
Oh, my goodness.
online, but you can't reach it unless you've got a subscription. But there are minutes to that meeting that are available, and Bruchak also talks about that his sister's an expert in colonial history.
Yes, yes.
And so his books are just absolutely incredible. But to have fifth graders say, where's the sequel
Yeah.
on historical fiction, our
Yes.
historical novels.
Yes, they like sequels. They feel safe in sequels, don't they? There's an extensive author's note at the end of it, which is very interesting, and I thank you for pointing all of that out. Another one of his books is Children of the Longhouse, and this takes place in it takes place in 1444, I think, and it's about a Mohawk Indian, and he overhears some boys from his tribe talking about they're plotting to go and steal some horses, which is really quite a dangerous thing to his tribe. They don't want. He knows it's not good, so he reports it to the elders, and of course that puts him in terrible standing with his peers who were going to do the raiding. So they're going to get their revenge on him during a game of lacrosse. It's a traditional day-long, I think, game, and it can be very dangerous. It's played lacrosse, you've seen them beating each other with sticks. So you learn a lot about lacrosse, you learn a lot about their way of life. His sister's viewpoint comes in, and so I think this one would be a good one that boys might enjoy reading as well as girls. But is there anyone who's not familiar with Birch Bark House? Is this one? I don't know if you are familiar with it? Okay. This was written by Louise Erdrich, who's best known for her adult novels, I think, Beat Queen and Master Butcher's Singing Club and so on. And her attempt was, as far as I know, she has not written another book, but in this, her plan was to create a series from a Native American perspective, and I think she called it a Native American Little House on the Prairies type series, but she hasn't written another one that I know of, and this one is about a little girl who does not know that she survived a smallpox outbreak, and she was the only survivor in her family, and she's raised by another family, but it happened when she was a baby, and she only knows her way of life, and much of the story reveals her way of life in an island in Lake Superior, and then there's a tragic outbreak of smallpox in her community, and in her family suffers, and she ends up taking care of her family, and there's a death as well, and but then only does she learn why she is able to survive this outbreak.
There actually is a sequel to that.
There is, okay, it's pretty recent then, isn't
It's
it?
very recent. I think it's
I thought you had it here.
Okay, I don't have it yet, but I know that was her intent.
Yeah.
Game of set. So I've seen it at Book Exchange. If anybody wants to.
I'll have to. And two more modern stories. One of them is Indian Shoes. This is a delightful book written by Cynthia Smith, and she is from the Creek Nation, and it's written in an episodic fashion, so you could read chapters of it. They stand alone as individual stories, and it is about Ray Half Moon and his grandfather who is raising him. His parents aren't alive, and the stories reveal some cultural things, but some just this loving bond between a grandfather and his grandson, and also it's written with a real sense of humor. And last is the book Sky, and I always put my barcodes in there. You can't see the cover very well. And when I bought this first, I thought, oh, a book about Montana. Oh, a book with a girl and a horse. It'll just fly out the door. But there's a lot more to the story than just that. Georgia, it takes place in 1964, and Georgia is a young girl who lives with her parents are dead, and she's being raised by her grandparents, and they live outside the Blackfoot Reservation, and it's based on true events of a flood, a dam bursting in a flood, and her house is washed away, and returning to the land, she finds a foal and she nurses it back to health. But what I found especially important about this story was when her family is flooded out and they escape, there are other families in town that are in the same situation, both whites and Indians, and they go to the school for safety the way you would with Red Cross during other situations. And all of the white people are put in the gym with cots and blankets and pillows, and all of the Indian people are diverted to a classroom. They're jammed in, nothing extra, no pillows, no blankets, and that's where they stay. There's barely even enough room for them all to sit down. When they go to the gym for food, they're told that they have to pay $5 a family, and they get to the table and they have to pay $1 a family for silverware and plates. While they're in line for the food, a newly arrived white family comes in, goes past the table and says, well, how much does the food cost? And they said, it's all free, all you can eat. And we have so many stories. This is Black History Month, and we have so many stories that show the injustice of slavery, that show the injustice of the Jim Crow laws and discrimination against African Americans. And to the point where I think our children really understand that. But I think that's the first story that I've read in a children's book giving that example, of discrimination. And so I've talked. There's a lot more down there you could look at when you're at your leisure. Thank you very much. Oh, yes. Yes.
And I'm not sure if the Beaver Skills Fire story, just so all are aware, should never be
Yeah.
outside of winter.
Yes.
So when there is no snow on the ground, you should not tell that story.
That applies to all the coyote stories.
Yes. And that's in the introduction to these books, you're reminded of it. Thank you for that. Yes, and I think in the introduction to this book, it tells you that as well.
The other thing on that is Jermaine says that that's a really good introduction, so that if you're doing upper level stuff, middle
This one?
school and higher, use it as the introduction because the fire management tapes they're cross-level curriculum.
And the website is
Yeah.
excellent.
And the other thing she said, and she emphasized this over and over again at a conference that I was at in the Midwest, was that if you have any questions, please contact the tribes in terms of the literature. And they said that over and over and over again. So regardless of what you're doing, check with the tribe to see what their point of view is.
Thank you.
So I just want to let everybody know really quick that we're taping this and donating a copy of it to the TRC at the university. And in order to get all our voices on tape so that we can hear the thing in its entirety, I have a microphone. So if you'd raise your hand and just give me a second to get over to you so we can get your voice on tape, that would be excellent. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Dottie Susag. If it's okay with you, I'm going to sit here. Is that all right? I'm Norwegian and Swedish and taught in Sims for 20 years, 22 years high school English, and retired in 2003, and then I retired in 2005. And now I am consulting in schools about Native American literature, and I work part-time for OPI, doing workshops and reading lesson plans and reading books. And I didn't put this together, I just made a lot of recommendations. Mandy Smoker actually did it. In 1992-93, I applied for the Krista McCullough Fellowship and said I would write a curriculum for using Native American literature because I was finding that I didn't have resources. I'd been reading James Welch, and I was using The Last Best Place in a Montana literature class, but I didn't have access or didn't know where there were other resources. So I said, this is what I'll do. I'll go to all of the reservations, visit with teachers, talk to tribal people, culture committees, and compile something. And then if I wasn't given that award, and then what in the world, how was I going to do that? One day Stan Juneau from Browning came to my school in Sims. He was a friend of my principal, and he said, we just wondered if maybe you wouldn't like a little help from our daughter, who happened to be Denise Juno. And she was working on, wanted a summer kind of a project, and that's where I first met Denise and have been working with her ever since. And I'm really, really impressed. I told her when she made that speech at that Oyate conference, I thought, this is a woman. My goodness sakes, what she's done, it's amazing. So anyway, that's where it began. And when I finished the curriculum K through 12 for using Native American literature, it was 600 pages long. NCTE said that's too long to print. We'd like to market it to secondary teachers. And so I took the Montana and regional primary section and we published that through OPI. So there is a separate publication that has bilingual books from each of the reservation communities, each of the tribal communities listed in there, but they're all briefly listed in the back of this. We're passing some of these out because I just want you to look. There are some things I'm going to talk about that are related to this a little bit. The whole first section is K through 12, so even though it was marketed to high school teachers, there is a whole section on themes and a way of looking at literature from Western European and Native perspective. Because what I found is that there are many things that are similar, but there are really some important things that are very unique to marginalized peoples as well as, and particularly Native people. So I'm going to, when I talk about the books that I'm going to mention today, I'm going to say that some of them can be used in teaching this theme or that theme, and the page numbers are in the handout that you have. So it isn't a problem for me if you're paging through this book while I'm talking, or if you're looking at the handout that has my name at the top of it. And okay? So anybody have a question? You've got something to be looking at while you have it in front of you. And if you want to, you could look at this, because I might need it later, but I'll ask you back for it. I was so glad that Becky was talking about asking a question about perspective. I was in a school this afternoon, and those teachers just had not asked the question, whose perspective is this story written from? How do they see the world? What's their opinion? Because that definitely is going to influence what they write. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just for sure going to be a different perspective. So I want to recommend that that's what you do. I'm going to just talk about four books and read a little bit from some. If you could get the handout, you can look at my suggestions for what to do with them. Raise your hand if you're familiar with Two Old Women. Oh, a lot of you, that's good. Two Old Women is written by Velma Wallace, Athabascan. It is a story that her mother told her. It's probably 600 years old. It's now called legend because it had been told and retold so many times, but it is based on a true experience in this Athabascan community. There's a map in here, and it's pretty fun to be able to look at that map and see where in Alaska now these people were living and where they moved in terms of the story. It's a story of a band of people that are starving. They are having trouble finding food, and they have these two old women, one in her 70s, the other one in her early 80s, they estimated. Although that is very hard for me to believe when I think about how old I am and whether or not I could have done this or not. But anyway, they decide that in order to get ahead, they're going to have to leave these two women behind. Now, this doesn't end up with the noble idea of, okay, we will be sacrificed, we'll lie down and die. These are normal human beings who are really pissed. Excuse me. They are angry that this has happened to them. And not only that, the daughter doesn't stand up for them, and yet she hands them some rawhides so that they do have something that maybe they can use. I'm going to read, let's see, just a little bit from here. It is a story about the problems of aging, about caring for the elderly, about survival, about personal sacrifice, and it is about the age-old conflict between what is more important, the rights of the general good or the individual. That's what the story is about. I'm going to read just from pages 15 to 16 here, which is the end of the first chapter. So these women have been left. One's name is Sa, and the other is Chidziak, and that's the best I can do to pronounce it. Velma Wallace will go to schools. I know she has gone to Pablo. They invited her to come. They used this book K through 8. Everybody read it somehow or other, and they had activities for the whole week. Sa looked up at the blue sky. To an experienced eye, the blue this time of winter meant cold. Soon it would be colder yet as night approached. With a worried frown on her face, Sa kneeled beside her friend and spoke in a gentle but firm voice. "My friend," she said, and paused, hoping for more strength than she felt. "We can sit here and wait to die. We will not have long to wait. Our time of leaving this world should not come for a long time yet," she added quickly, when her friend looked up with panic-stricken eyes. "But we will die if we just sit here and wait. This would prove them right about our helplessness." Chidziak listened with despair, knowing that her friend was dangerously close to accepting a fate of death from cold and hunger. Sa spoke more urgently. "Yes, in their own way they have condemned us to die. They think we are too old and useless. They forget that we too have earned the right to live. So I say, if we are going to die, my friend, let us die trying, not sitting." So these women decide, this grandson has also left a little hatchet up in the tree, and he points to it, and that was it was really his lifeline, that hatchet was, and he sacrificed and decided to give it to them. But of course he didn't make the big announcement, he just pointed. So they had those two things, and the end of the story is that they do survive. They end up going back to a place where they remembered there was a lot of game and fish, and they have the most huge cache of food. And the band comes back again and finds this empty space, and there aren't any bones there. They must have lived. So they finally locate them, and then the women have to decide, will we trust them or not? There's one other place that I want to read that shows you how very real this is. Sa gathered a little courage to force herself to move. But the aches in her bones proved to be too much for her this time. Again, they had pushed their bodies beyond their limits. Without meaning to, Sa let out a painful moan, and she felt a great urge to cry. She hung her head, defeated by all they had been through these past few days, and the cold made her feel even more despair. As much as she wanted to, her body would not move. She was too stiff. Chidziak listened lethargically to her friend's sniffles. She was amazed that she could sit and listen to Sa cry and feel no emotion. Perhaps it was not meant for them to go on. Perhaps the young ones were right. She and Sa were fighting the inevitable. It would be easy for them to snuggle deeper into the warmth of their fur clothing and fall asleep. They would not have to prove anything to anyone anymore. Perhaps the sleep that Sa feared would not be so bad after all. At least Chidziak thought to herself it would not be as bad as this.
Yet for as little will as their older friend had, Sa possessed enough determination for both of them. Shrugging off the cold, the pain in her sides, the empty stomach, and the numbness in her legs, she struggled to get up and this time succeeded. As had become her morning habit, she limped around the campsite until feelings slowly began to course through her bloodstream. When the circulation returned, there was more pain, but Sa concentrated her attention on gathering more wood to build the fire. Now, her friend gets up because she has a full bladder. So, you don't want to lie in that, so you have to get up. Kids, I mean, we talk about trying to understand different cultures, but children don't really understand the issues that old people face. So you have pain, so you have heart trouble moving. This book really puts you in that place. And then one of the ways that I infused literature into everything was to use poetry. And so anytime I use one major work, then I'm always adding some kind of poetry. This is poetry by Mary Tallmountain, who is also at the Baskin and Catholic, and it's called The Women in Old Parkas. Snapping gunshot cold, blue stubborn lips clapped shut. The women in old parkas loosen snares, intent and slow. They handle muskrat, Yukon way, appease his spirit, yea, ga. Bare purple hands stiffen, must set lines again. Night drops quick black in winter house. Round shadows cook fresh meat, soup steam floats, thin bellies grumble. They pick up skin work, squint, turn lamp wick down, kerosene almost gone. So anyway, oh, this winter is the worst. Everything running out, not much furs. They make soft woman hum. But hey, how about those new parkas we hung up for stick dance? How the people sing, how crazy shadows dip and stamp on dance house walls. Their remembering arms rise like bird wings. At morning they look into sky, laugh at little lines of rain, finger their old parkas, think, spring is coming soon. You can just feel the cold in that poem. Okay, the next one I wanted to talk about is Counting Coup. Raise your hand if you're familiar with this one. This isn't Colton's book I'm talking about. I'm talking about Joseph Medicine Crow. This is the story of becoming a warrior chief. He was the very first Crow to earn his master's degree, and it's his story, his growing up story. And when I talk in the handout about this story, you can use it to teach essential understandings 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. It's memoir, culture, history, and the themes, remembering the old ways, at home within circles, between two worlds. Almost all of the themes can be used when you're teaching this book. I'm just going to read a little bit from where he is talking about his relatives. I was raised by many different relatives, but I spent most of my years with my mother's parents, the Yellowtails, in their log house located about 4 miles south of the nearest town, Lodgegrass, Montana. Although my grandfather Yellowtail had not been a warrior, he raised me to be one, to be tough and strong like old-time warriors. When I was about 6 or 7, he started my physical education regimen. I remember it was cold, maybe November, and snow was on the ground. One morning, Grandfather said, "All right, get up, put on your pants and shirt, that's all, don't put on your shoes. Now, run around the house once in the snow, barefoot." So I did. I'll tell you, my feet were really cold when I came back in. Well, the next day, he said, run around the house twice. Then it was 3 times, 4 times, until I got up 20 times. I had to run around that house each morning, no matter how cold it was outside. He gradually saw to it that my feet were tough and able to withstand the cold. Then one morning he said, "All right, now the next one. Don't put your clothes on. Run over to that sagebrush over there, pointing to a bush about 50 yards away. Run over there, and when you get there, flop down on your back and roll over about 4 times, one way and then the other, and then come back. I did that. Now that's what's amazing. I did that. He has a grandfather telling him to do things that, in our right minds would we do it. Say, I didn't think about it, but this is a great pair. That would be really good to read this section when you're reading the 2 old women story. Okay. He made me do that every day. The second day I rolled a little farther, 5 times, 6 times. Some days when it was below 0 outside, it was hard to do. But the training never stopped, and finally I had to roll about 20 times through that deep snow and run back to the house. It's a wonder I never got frostbite. One part of Grandfather Yellowtail's own program for healthy living was to take a cold bath every morning of the year, summer and winter. Naturally, he would take me along. In the wintertime, he had to chop holes in the ice that covered the Little Horn River so he could water his horses. Every morning, after opening the holes, he would get in and take a dip. And he'd make me get in there too. The river water ran really fast past that hole, creating a powerful suction. He'd hold me and dip me in and out, and then we'd head for home. The river was about 150 yards from the door of the house. Our feet would have frozen by the time we got back, so we could wear overshoes. But I tell you, some mornings when we got back from our dip, Grandfather's braids were frozen stiff like 2 sticks. Then he would gently thaw out his braids, otherwise they would have snapped off. I had to go through that kind of training every winter, and while I lived with the Yellowtails, I've always been able to withstand cold weather, and I've never been sick. I think the old Sioux warrior who gave me the name Winterman gave me a good name. Of course, training of my grandfather Yellowtail also really helped. Think about how reading this contradicts stereotypes about who Indian people are, that you might read in other non-Indian authored materials. But this one got a kick out of because I think there are several sections in the Little House on the Prairie books and the Indian in the Cupboard books that are kind of like this, only just a little bit different. He's telling the story about Flat Dog who went to the store, and he looked around, but he didn't know how to say eggs, so he asked the grandmother, he said, "How do you say eggs in the white man's language?" "I don't know," she said. So at that point, the clerk in the store asked Flat Dog what he wanted. Flat Dog looked around but couldn't see any eggs to point to. When the clerk again asked Flat Dog what he wanted, the old man took the clerk by the hand and led him to the middle of the store. Taking his blanket from around his shoulders, Flat Dog laid it on the floor and shaped it into a round nest-like form. Then he squatted over the blanket nest and cackled like a chicken. Then he got up, pointed into the imaginary nest, and said, "Papoose." Well, the clerk laughed, walked behind the counter, and brought Flat Dog some eggs. Flat Dog put his money on the counter and turned to leave, and as he walked past my grandmother and me, he said in Crow, "This white man is really dumb. I had to talk to him like a child." So, I mean, I've had students that if we have a foreign exchange student come and they don't speak English very well, the kids regard them as stupid. That is the way we are. And so if 99% of all of the books available previously to teachers are written by non-Indian people, and the stories about language and different cultures are from the perspective of somebody that's non-Indian, then what is it going to be? Whoever those Indian people are, whatever they're saying is dumb. This is a great contradiction to that. And then this is a good little book, Rising Voices, Writings of Young Native Americans, and in it is a little poem by Len Plenty. The Bighorn River flows through the reservation. As it goes, it meets the Little Bighorn. They are like a big brother and a little brother together. The sound of it makes the reservation special. It seems as if it protects the reservation with happiness and care. The reservation knows it has a close friend, and that's the river. The river wants to flow to all four winds, but knows it can just flow one way with the same wind. Okay. Can I have about 7 more minutes, do you think?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. This is a little book by Michael Doris, and Michael Doris has written a couple of introductions to some of these
Yes.
We Are Still Here
Yes.
in that series. Michael Doris is, I think, well, he's not alive anymore. He's Louise Erdrich's husband, he was. One of the finest writers, and I recommend a lot of books about Indians, about Native Americans. I don't ever recommend any books that aren't good writing. This is really, really fine writing. It is full of metaphor. It is the story of a 10, 11-year-old girl who is one of the characters in Michael Doris's Yellow Raft in Blue Water. Her mother is alcoholic. The girl is waiting for her to come home. In fact, the very beginning of it, she never says goodbye, and so I never know when she'll be gone. It's one of those things that you find out by its happening. Like lightning, like the ring of a telephone, like the first smell of chill in the air that announces summer's over. Every time Mom doesn't come home in time for supper, I begin by ignoring the clock. I don't switch on the overhead light. This is not a terribly dark story because the tone isn't dark. But it is a story of a young girl dealing with a single parent because her father doesn't live with them in Seattle, and she's by herself, and her mother doesn't come home for 2 days because she's alcoholic and she has been picked up. She's going to be taken to rehabilitation, and so then the father's got to be responsible. He's black. The mother is Indian from a Montana reservation, and a good question to ask is, why in the world and how did they get out to Seattle? Possibly through relocation. So it's a way of talking about the essential understanding and the federal Indian policy of relocation. That's essential understanding number 5. But anyway, the black father, he cares about her, but he doesn't know how he can take care of her. So he thinks, well, a foster situation would be best. Well, the very first situation is with a white family. They strike me, the Potters, as plush, stuffed animals, squeezed up against you in a small closet so you can hardly breathe. I know that's not fair. I know I've got nothing to be suspicious about. I know from the talk I've heard from the kids in school who've been dumped into terrible foster homes that I should be grateful to Irene for finding me the Potters. I lie awake staring at the ceiling, which I can see thanks to Snoopy, and I try to picture the scene tomorrow. Everybody sitting down to the table at the same time for breakfast, which Frida makes herself instead of just running to the 7-Eleven. Bill bowing his head to say grace, Ben and Brian kidding around each other. It's like watching a science fiction movie, except I'm the alien, the visitor from outer space, who's trying to figure out human customs. And it just gets to this point where I realize that as nice as Earth is, all I want is to go home to my cold, barren planet, the one with 12 moons and a dying blue sun and an exploding core. Anyway, then that doesn't really work out. So then she's taken to Mrs. Jackson, who's black. She's given the alternative. Do you want to live with a white family or a black family? She never had that kind of an option before. Mrs. Jackson is heavy into rules. Where this goes, what time that happens, going through her apartment is like a long guided tour of the most boring museum on earth. It's as though she's thrown all her considerable energy into schedules and furniture arrangement, into imposing herself on all that surrounds her, and now the only loose thread is me, her new project. Well, they get along really well, except that the daughter needs this mother's help, and so now Rayone has to go someplace else. And the father says, well, how about going down to my parents in Oklahoma? And so it's Louisville, Kentucky, I guess. Anyway, he takes her down there, and her grandmother is white. So talk about an identity problem. This girl is Indian, and her father's black, and now she has white grandparents because they adopted her father. Well, these grandparents, or grandmother, takes her in. But now, out of the blue, here is this army of women, all ages, 2 colors, revolving around me as if I am their dream come true. At the end, she is able to reconcile with her mother. There is not a lot of heavy anger in here, which you might think would be reasonable. It just isn't in there. And so that's why I think that this is pretty, I think it's a great read aloud. I don't know whether you give it to a kid at the 4th or 5th grade level, because I think some of the metaphors need to be talked about some. But when she sees her mother again, and I believe as our dark brown eyes look into each other's without any doubt, without any hesitation, without any holding back, that this time she really and truly means to try. You look at who's the grown-up here. This is a real growing up story. And the poem that I wanted to read is a darker poem, but Anita Andreessi, by the way, several of these poems that I'm reading are in the first part of Roots and Branches. This is called The Girl Who Loves the Sky. Anita Andreessi is Yaki. And I use this poem when I would introduce an essay, then and now essay that my students would write. Outside the 2nd grade room, the jacaranda tree blossomed into purple lanterns. The papery petals drifted, darkening the windows. Inside, the room smelled like glue. The desks were made of yellowed wood, the tops littered with eraser rubbings, rulers, and big fat pencils. Colored chalk meant special days. There I learned how to make butter by shaking a jar until the pale cream clotted into one sweet mass. And there I learned that numbers were fractious beasts with dens like dim zeros. And there I met a blind girl who thought the sky tasted like cold metal when it rained, and whose eyes were always covered with the bruised petals of her lids. She loved the formless sky defined only by sounds or the cool umbrellas of clouds. On hot, still days, we listened to the sky falling like chalk dust. We heard the noon whistle of the pig mash factory, smelled the sourness of homebound men. I had no father. She had no eyes. We were best friends. The other girls drew shaky hopscotch squares on the dusty asphalt, talked about pajama parties, weekend cookouts, and parents who bought sleek-finned cars. Alone we sat in the canvas swings, our shoes digging into the sand, then pushing until we flew high over our heads, our hands streaked with red rust from the chains that kept us safe. I was born blind, she said, an act of nature. Sure, I thought, like birds born without wings, trees without roots. I didn't understand. The day she moved, I saw the world clearly. The sky backed away from me like a departing father. I sat under the jacaranda, catching the petals in my palm and closing them until my fist was another lantern, hiding a small and bitter flame. Both of these poems about loss, about single parenting, and this honestly expresses the anger, of course. I'm just going to mention The Trickster and the Troll by Virginia Driving Hawk Snevy. She is Lakota, her husband's Norwegian. And so she has this story where Iktumi and the troll meet each other out on the plains, and they can't find their people. And they introduce themselves to each other. One of the things about Troll is he's blubbering. I mean, he cries all the time, holy smokes. And that must be where I got that kind of, I cry all the time, so maybe that's a Norwegian thing to do. Iktumi thinks it's silly. But they finally, Toomey realizes he can't trick him. He tries. They're hunting for their people, and he sees his people, and they are homesteading and very hungry. And Toomey finds his people, and they have been killed by homesteaders or settlers. And then they go to stay in the Pahasapa, the Black Hills, for a little while, and then finally come out and look for their people again, and they find them, and they're settled, and they live in houses, and as they peek in the window, they hear a grandmother in the Lakota house telling a story, and then there was Iktumi, and he was going along, and then in the Norwegian house, there Olaf is telling his grandson a story about Once, a long time ago, there was a troll that decided to come across the ocean to protect the families. So there's the carrying on of the tradition. And then, very last, this poem by Mandy Smoker Broadus, in her little publication, Another Attempt at Rescue, because this poem is about a relationship between a white man, her friend, Carl Lathander, and Mandy, or the speaker, an Indian girl. We talked once of driving all the remote gravel roads, writing from here and there, a little like Hugo, though neither of us had read his poems yet. Today I'm wondering about those unwritten drafts. Could they have predicted the severity of this drought? Would they have spoken to our own landscape, one of anger, sympathy, and remorse? You, the eventual heir to your family's homestead, and me, an Indian woman, who leases her land to white men made up of the same storm and grit and hunger as your grandfather. What if we had found a message in verse written from some small town? Abandon this place. Would we have listened and turned the car east or south and left behind the land our families have lived on for generations? But where could we travel and not long for the ache of wind blowing over our open land? And how long could we have held ourselves back, away from our need to feel claimed by a place we can only, with our limited tongue, call home? So, that's that. Yeah.
So, I guess we can give our speakers a hand before we